Welcome, I'm Darren, and I'll be your guide today as I rank the worst insert card designs of 1993 for baseball. When putting together this list, there were a couple of cards that kind of surprised me because it's not that I was surprised that they ended up on the list, as much as while I very much recognized they needed to be on the list, I was a bit surprised with how I came to kind of appreciate the cards a bit. But every card on this list certainly does belong here because while 1993 was the year when the whole industry definitely took a clear step into becoming a new modern era with really good designs, that doesn't mean that everything was a success. And in some cases, they just hadn't fully formed their ideas, and in other cases, they were still back in the previous century of a year or two earlier, which is kind of the way things were going at the time. But for the most part, most of the cards on this list are cards that are underachieving, is really the best way to put it. And a perfect example of this is where we start off in one of the 4 honorable mention cards that I have listed on this list, because the reason I have 4 is because, look, they're a bottom 5 list, that's very clear, but there are 4 others that are all that can't get let off the hook. And the very first one for me to look at is the Fleer Ultra All-Star cards, which are, okay, well, this is first off a really nice design with all of the things that needs to be great. The color of gray is really good, especially with the fine detailed gold foil. Those two as a combination just look perfect. The logo is, I love the logo for the All-Star theme, and the pictures of the players are really good. This card has everything it needs to be one of the best inserts of 1993, and it is one of the best, with the minor exception of that whole background theme that they were going with, which is just, I'd like to say I don't know what they were doing here, but unfortunately I do. They were doing a stylized treatment where they were turning it into rock is kind of the theme that the effect was providing. And it looks messy and it looks dumb, really, really dumb. And it frustrates me because of that. Now, the card overall, other than that, is truly a rousing success. And if they had just left the background as a background, it would have been a great looking card. If they had had a solid gray background, it would have been a great looking card. In either of those cases, this would have been a contender for the best inserts of 1993, but they didn't. And so that background drags it down into the depths here, because every time I look at the card, I go, oh, that's a nice card. And then when I look at the card, I go, oh no, that is not a nice card at all. That is the problem. It is a card that has so much potential and it gets heavily ruined. But it is a nice looking card other than that, and that's why I have it located here. And when I shift over to my number 8, which is the Donruss Spirit card, this is a whole different mess, because here we have a Roberto Alomar card that is, I'm just going to say it, I love this card. I really do. It's got a great landscape shot of showing him starting into a base steal. On the card back, you have him finishing it. I am not a big fan of the yellow text, like to any extent, but I don't really mind it that much because the way all of this works is great. It's a full bleed card because they want to have it all about this image. And look, with Roberto here, this absolutely works. I love it. I love the way this card comes across. And if this was an SP card, I'd say it's a really good SP card. Okay, it doesn't have his name on it. I'd like it to have it, but it doesn't really need it. But that's this card. But when this is not an SP card, it's part of an insert set. When you look at the other inserts, you realize, okay, this was the fluke. Because in most of the cases, it's kind of a tight shot of the player, or it's not a well thought out image. So it doesn't really work with the landscape of the card. And then because they don't have any names on it, feels kind of muddled up and just kind of random. And this is supposed to be something that is a special treat for baseball card collectors. And maybe for collectors at the time, it may have been really great to find the card and try to figure out who all the players are or whatever. I hope it was, because it isn't that way now. It really is not. The card doesn't have any design theme that dominates the card, so it's just these images that are scattered around, and the images don't usually prove to be well chosen. So while there is the Roberto Alomar card, that's the only reason I have it located here. All the other cards, I'd want them further down the list. But I'm keeping it here because at least when they did succeed, they at least did succeed. I can't really say the same for another Donruss insert set called MVP, because in this case, okay, it's weird for me to do that lead-in because this is actually the best crafted card of all of them. Of all the cards, this is a complete card, and it actually looks pretty good. It has a full bleed image like before, but it had images that worked well with it. The way the black background was affected, it works well. It has the Donruss logo up at the top is a nice subtle little element on it that doesn't really do much. I love the gold foil medallion down there, and then the ribbon works well enough. When I look at this card, I go, that is a complete card. What I don't say is, that is an insert card. That's the problem that this has. Of all the other cards, nearly every other card I look at, with two exceptions, I look at it and I go, that's an insert card. That came out of a pack of cards. This card doesn't quite feel that way. It has a boring quality to it that makes it look more like it was maybe an insert set stuffed into a complete set that was sold individually. This doesn't look like it was designed to come out of packs. It doesn't have a celebration to it. So even though the Spirit of the Game cards are not as well developed and well formed as the MVP cards, and they don't work as well as a set, when I look at the Spirit of the Game cards, I go, dude, that came out of a pack. It absolutely did. And I was excited to get it. With this, I don't feel that way. I really don't. And an insert is supposed to be its own little celebration. So that's why I have this located here on the list. But then we have one more honorable mention, and the honorable mention I'm going to is one that very well could be in the bottom 5, which is the Fleer Ultra MVP cards. And this is actually the second part of an insert set where the first half, or roughly half, was so well designed. They looked great. And then the second portion of the set had these card designs, which were totally different. And boy, this is a letdown. I mean, the card design is something that Fleer was doing at about this time, where they would have a bunch of like neon marquee signs kind of floating around in the back. And the problem Fleer had was they were doing way too many inserts all at once, and they couldn't really come up with good ideas. So this was one of those that they tossed out, and they could do different versions of it. And I think when they tried this with Flair, it pulled off. They were able to pull it off, but with Ultra, I don't think they ever really pulled this off. It's just too much of a jumbled mess. Yeah, that's the best way to say it. It's just too much of a jumbled mess. Doesn't look good as an insert set. It doesn't look good as a standalone for a player. It's just not good. That's the thing. But I have to say, I can't quite put this in the bottom 5 because while it belongs there, I can't figure out what to kick out, and that starts off at number 5 with Donruss Elite. And you knew this was going to show up here because it's Donruss Elite. I don't get what Donruss was doing with their Elite cards from 1991. Here we are at 1993. Is it better? Kind of. The problem with Donruss Elite is that it is all about the serial number on the back. That's all that it's about. The rest of the design just doesn't really read. And for baseball players or baseball collectors, they may not have noticed because in baseball, these cards were always more on the cutting edge side. But for those of us over in football and basketball, we knew how good we could get it. And the Donruss Elite cards were never that good. In fact, when I look at this card, okay, it has some nice qualities. It has the prism effect, but the prism is done in a more haphazard way with an effect that looks a little bit better than what we'd seen in the previous 2 years. Okay, so it's got that. And the design element in the center is a well-designed theme. It's just that doesn't work with the outside doesn't work with the inside outside's too strong. It's a clash of stuff, and I still hate the cardstock. So, all of that stuff's going on, but when I look at this card, I go, you know what? If that was in 1991, that'd be a good card. In fact, now that I think about it, if I think about the 1992 Elite card, that would have worked pretty well in 1990. And the 91 card would have worked pretty well in 1989, which means either these cards should have been released 2 years earlier, or Donruss Elite was just 2 years behind the game. And that's the problem this card has. It's an idea, and it's a good idea, but it's not a well-crafted idea. That's the problem with Donruss Elite, and it really is a disappointment where every time I look at it, I go, really? That's the best you could have come up with? But yeah, that's kind of the best they could have come up with. But that's not the only thing that Donruss did that fits on this section of the list, the bottom 5, because at number 4, I have Donruss long ball hitters. And for this case, okay, so this is a case where, if you remember back to the MVP cards, I talked about how they didn't feel like insert cards. That's what the long ball hitters feel like. But where the MVP cards felt like a complete design, these cards don't feel as good. They have a little bit more gold foil, or they have more things that have gold foil. But when you look at that whole design element down at the bottom, even Upper Deck in the previous 2 years was doing a better job with these lackadaisical designs. This looks like a 1992 complete set insert card. It really does, or a send-away, maybe a send-away card. I think the MVP fits better with the send-away concept, but this still pretty well fits with that concept. But the thing is that with these cards, it doesn't look like an insert set. It looks cheap. It absolutely looks cheap. In a way, I look at this and I would not be surprised if this was like Duracell or Burger King or something like that. It doesn't look like a professional card. But then when I move on to 1990 or to number 3, I'm going back to Ultra, and well, it's kind of interesting because Ultra's bookending it. We've been looking only at Donruss and Ultra through this whole time, but I assure you here at number 3, this is the last time we'll look at either of them with the all-rookie cards, or the all-rookie team cards. And this is a case where Ultra has, for me, they've hit their bottom in terms of they tried so hard, they made such a nice card. They've fixed the problem with the neon text. Now the neon text works better. The problem is all of that black in the back is way too dominant, and the player kind of disappears into the black. There's nothing that anchors the player. And understand, I'm a sucker for black cards. To me, that's the cheat code. But apparently, you can easily destroy a card using black, and in this case, that's the problem. It's a big void. This card feels like it needs a border, and the border might tie the whole card together. Otherwise, every time I look at it, I'm always surprised at how there's nothing that's a celebration about the player. He gets lost in the card. But the big problem with this card is obviously the Fleer Ultra logo that is just way too big. And it's not like you look at this and go, oh, that's a mini card. You look at this and you go, that logo is not supposed to be on that card. That's the way you look at it. It doesn't overpower the card as much as it is a weird element that you can't avoid. You can't get it out of your head. It is there whether you like it or not. And I think you have an idea of what side of that list I'm on. But that's the thing. This is a card that is a monstrous failure. And I wish that they had done a better job with it. They didn't, and so this is what we're stuck with. But at any rate, here we go with number 3. But when I move over to number 2, I'm moving on to o-pee-chee, as in all of the o-pee-chee inserts. Now, o-pee-chee is in a tough spot because Topps, when they were originally doing o-pee-chee, it was the Canadian release of their cards. And for those of us in the States, or those of us a long ways away from the northern border in the States, we would run into o-pee-chee cards, and they were like second-rate cards, like a cheap version. But that was the way that the Donruss Leaf cards were in the 80s as well. But when Donruss turned Leaf into a full brand, they made it a high-end brand. Well, Topps couldn't figure out how to make that work. So where they did try that with o-pee-chee, o-pee-chee never really worked. And with the regular o-pee-chee cards, they just seemed second-rate or third-rate. And the problem I have here is that with these cards, when I look at them, I think about Best. Best did cards that were of minor leaguers, and they looked cheap. these look like best cards. They don't look like professional cards at all. And it doesn't matter which of the o-pee-chee sets that you go with, it looks like it's one insert set with two different designs, and then there's a gold parallel, or that's just, it all looks the same. It all looks like o-pee-chee, and it all looks lousy. But while all that's fine and good, as it were, number one to me is very obvious, which is the Score Boys of Summer cards. And I think you already know all that you need to know about this card. This is not a subtle card, and this is just one. I would show you multiple cards, but it would melt the screen. It's too much. It's way too much, and it doesn't look like any semblance of an insert design. I'm not even going to go on about this because you already know everything you need to know just by looking at it. I am absolutely not a fan. So, that is my list of the worst insert card designs for baseball in 1993. If you're following along with me, I still have hockey to do, so that will be, no, not hockey. I'm sorry. I will be doing I've just about mentioned all the other sports. Basketball is the sport I'm going to be doing next and last. And then I'm going to do a summary of the worst of across all four sports. So that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks. So do check out for that. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I do urge you to do so. And yeah, well, thank you very much for watching.